Whoops, he's a little in the way. Sorry. Uh, Hi, mythology lovers. This is another installment uh, uh, on my YouTube channel, Myths and Legends from Around the World. Uh, anyway, sorry, I just got home from work. I'm a little sweaty. Uh, I got a request from one of my subscribers, uh, uh, to do a video on unicorns and horses in general. So I thought I did go through my books and see what I could find. For this video, I'm going to use mainly this book here. This is the series I talk about often in my videos, the Enchanted World, 21 books, each on a different topic of mythology. This particular one is on magical beasts, and you can see the unicorns on the cover. Basically, the thing to remember about unicorns that I can gather, the few stories that I know of, is that they represent purity. And, they represent the springtime. They say that there are battles between unicorns and lions. The lion represents the summer. The unicorn represents the spring. And so the unicorn grows stronger in the spring, and the lion grows stronger in the summer. And also the unicorn, like I said, represents purity. And one of the ways it expresses this purity is that at night, when all the venomous night creatures spread their poison in the fresh water, in lakes and streams and rivers, the unicorn would dip his horn in the water and purify it, so the water would be safe to drink again. It's believed in legend that the horn of the unicorn could stop any poison. So if you suspect that somebody hands you something to drink and it's poisonous, take your unicorn horn and pour the drink into the horn, and it'll purify the liquid and neutralize the poison. So it's believed that if you could hunt a unicorn and capture it and cut off the horn, it could be used to neutralize any kind of poison. But it's like nearly impossible to catch a unicorn, because according to legends, the only thing that can capture a unicorn is actually a maiden, a young virgin girl. Some people speculate that the reason is that the only thing that could match the purity of a unicorn is a young virgin girl. You know the Christians, and how virginity is seen as a virtue, especially in young women. So usually stories of unicorns have to do with the hunters will go off and try and find a unicorn, and they would bring a virgin girl with them. And whenever they think the unicorn when they track it and the unicorn runs away, they try and strategically place the virgin girl in a place where they think the unicorn is going to cross paths with her. And then the unicorn slowly goes up to her and places his head on her lap. And then the hunters come and capture the unicorn, cut off his horn, sadly. And let me see if I can find an illustration in here that talks about that. Yes, see, here's one story that here's the virgin girl crying because she was used to capture this poor unicorn that they're now cutting off the horn of. And actually, in China, they have their own version of the unicorn. It's called the qilin, and it also represents virtue. And sometimes it appears to women who are about to give birth to a great philosopher or thinker. like supposedly the mother of Confucius had a unicorn appear to her before she gave birth to Confucius. And another interesting unicorn, well, I don't know if it's officially a unicorn, but they say that the horse of Alexander the Great had a horn. So his name was Bucephalus, and he was a wondrous horse. And images of him, usually there's a horn in his head. And it was a great sadness when Bucephalus died. What else can I say about unicorns? Another horse-like mythical beast is, of course, Pegasus. Pegasus is the winged horse from Greek mythology. Now, the birth of Pegasus is actually kind of interesting. What happens is that there was this beautiful priestess who was in charge of the temple of Athena. Unfortunately, she was raped by the god Poseidon, and inside the temple of Athena. So Athena got very angry. And who does she take her anger out on? And she doesn't take it out on her brother Poseidon. She takes it out on the poor priestess and turns her into this ugly gorgon named Medusa. And when Perseus kills Medusa, he's because of that movie Clash of the Titans. Pegasus is in that movie, and he flies on Pegasus and carries the head of Medusa with him. But actually, the first person to ride Pegasus is actually not Perseus. Perseus, he can fly, but that's because he's got winged sandals. And when he kills Medusa, out from her body pops Pegasus, because that's who she was impregnated with when Poseidon raped her. In the land, there was this king that ruled this land that was terrorized by this monster called the Chimera. And the Chimera was this kind of composite creature, part lion, part goat, part serpent. And the serpent spewed venom, and the lion spewed fire. And I don't know what the goat did. Probably bleeded a lot. And so Bellerophon was a hero that was tasked with eliminating this monster. So he used Pegasus to help, kill the Chimera. Luckily, because he was on Pegasus, he was able to fly pretty high, safe out of the range of the fire and the venom that was shot out of the Chimera. So Bellerophon, he killed Chimera by raining down arrows from the back of Pegasus. And so after killing the Chimera, he went on other adventures with Pegasus. But then he got pompous, and he thought he could fly up to Mount Olympus and meet the gods. So he had Pegasus try and fly up there, and he was struck down by the gods. But they loved Pegasus. They put him in the stars as a constellation, and I believe he's a constellation. And one more horse story. This is not actually he's mythological, but there's nothing about him that has mythological features. He doesn't have wings. He doesn't have horns. What happens is that, you've heard of legends of King Arthur, but there's also a whole series of legends about Charlemagne and his paladins. And what happens is that there's a whole bunch of stories about those guys, and very interesting. And what happens is that I first came across those stories of Charlemagne with this book here. This book is amazing. Myths and Legends of the Middle Ages. And this is part of a series of books called the Myths and Legends series. And there's sections in here that talk about Charlemagne and his knights, or his paladins, as they call them. And I first came across the story of of oh, sorry, I'm getting a message. Okay. Anyway, so what happens is that sorry. So in this book here, they talk about. I lost my train of thought there for a second. What happens is I mean, the story of Charlemagne and his paladins, they go back to, medieval French stories. The most famous, they're called songs of deeds. Chanson du Roland is probably the most famous one, the Song of Roland. But what happens is that these stories were later taken up by later Italian writers, and and the main characters undergo name changes. For example, Roland becomes Orlando, and Ronald becomes Rinaldo, and Rinaldo had this amazing horse named Bayard, and what happens is that, unfortunately, they're all in the service of Charlemagne, but sometimes Charlemagne's judgment is really bad. For example, he has this piece of crap spoiled son who made life difficult for the various paladins that serve Charlemagne. At the slightest whim, he would demonize them and turn Charlemagne against them. And one of his targets was the sons of Aemon, which were four brothers. One of them was Rinaldo, and Rinaldo had this amazing horse named Bayard, and Bayard and Rinaldo had many great adventures. And what happens is that him and his brothers were on the outs with Charlemagne, and Rinaldo wanted to patch things up with his king Charlemagne, and Charlemagne said, "Nothing will make me happy unless you give your horse Bayard to my son." And Rinaldo says, "Okay, all right, fine, whatever you say, I'll do it." So he agrees to give his beloved Bayard to Charlemagne. And Charlemagne is a real bastard, though. Instead of giving the horse to his son, he decides to throw the horse overboard a ship in the ocean, and he tied millstones around Bayard and threw him overboard a ship. But Bayard fought against the millstones, and he looked for his master Rinaldo on the shore. And he struggled against the millstones and was strong enough to fight against the weight of these millstones. And he swam out of the ocean, and he stood next to his master Rinaldo, and he had this sad look on his face, like, "Why are you making them do this to me?" And but Charlemagne his heart was hardened, and he tried doing the same thing to Bayard, throwing him again overboard with millstones. And this time they led Rinaldo away, so that Bayard, when he surfaced to look to see where his master Rinaldo was, he said he gave up. He lost hope because he couldn't find Rinaldo on the shore, so he drowned sadly. It's an amazing story. The first time I read that story was in this book, Myths and Legends of the Middle Ages, by H.A. Guerber. I'll have the books and the stories below in the descriptions. Sorry about the distraction. Someone's trying to contact me, but I don't want to interrupt this video. The story on Pegasus I mostly got from one of my favorite books on mythology, Mythology by Edith Hamilton. It's a very standard book on Greek and Roman mythology. If you want the stories nicely and simply told, it's a great book for beginners. And also, The second time I read that story of Rinaldo and his horse Bayard was in Thomas Bulfinch's Mythology. Now, Thomas Bulfinch wrote this three-volume book on mythology. The first is on Greek and Roman mythology, called The Age of Fable. And the second two chapters have to do with medieval myths. This book here is the second and third volume. It's simply called Bulfinch's Mythology, and it's got the last two chapters. The second chapter is, it doesn't have The Age of Fable, this particular edition. It's published by Mentor, and but you could get probably cheap paperback versions of Bulfinch's Mythology, which has all three volumes: The Age of Fable, the second volume, which is The Age of Chivalry, which is mostly stories of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, and the last volume is The Legends of Charlemagne, and it has all the major stories of Charlemagne, including the story of Rinaldo and Bayard. And what's interesting is that Bulfinch himself says that he was inspired by less the medieval stories. I mean, yeah, the medieval stories of Charlemagne and his Paladins, but also those later Italian writers that took up the story of Charlemagne and his Paladins and gave it their own spin. I forgot one more mythical creature, the hippogriff. Now, you guys probably know the hippogriff from J.K. Rowling and her Harry Potter books. But the hippogriff actually goes much further back. The hippogriff is in a story by Ariosto called Orlando Furioso, and which means Mad Orlando. And the hippogriff was first in possession of this evil wizard by the name of Atlas, and he's defeated by this woman warrior called Bradamante, and she takes possession of the hippogriff. The hippogriff changes hands with several owners. He finally winds up in the hands of this hero by the name of Astolfo, and Astolfo is this interesting character in Orlando Furioso by Ariosto. I'll have this book below. If you ever want to read a fun book that goes back to the 1500s, I really recommend that book. And but the hippogriff is an amazing beast. He's able to ride all the way up to he takes Astolfo actually all the way up to the moon. And the reason why it's called Orlando, the book is called Orlando Furioso, Mad Orlando, is because he's madly in love with this woman who doesn't love him back. And he literally loses his mind. So he's sent up to the moon where everybody who's lost their mind, their brains are literally there. And the biggest brain of all belongs to Orlando. And so he manages to get the brain of Orlando and brings it back down to Earth with the help of the hippogriff. And he manages to give the brains back to Orlando. His sanity is restored. But unrequited love can do that to you, I guess. You lose your mind over that stuff. It's funny. A lot of people like to say, how do you know unicorns didn't exist? Maybe they did. It's funny because I don't know how, some of my viewers are probably old enough to remember that back in the 1980s, Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus advertised that they actually had unicorns. And there was one unicorn in particular that they had in their show. And animal rights activists were very angry about this because it looked a lot like a goat. And they were saying, what'd you do? Take a goat and stick a unicorn on him surgically? That's animal abuse. And supposedly one of these goats was examined by a veterinarian, and he found that the goat had their horn buds. I guess horn buds are what eventually grow the horns. They were taken from the sides and moved to the center of the head. So instead of growing two horns, they grew only one. Supposedly that's what they did surgically. But I remember that they made a big deal advertising, we have a real live unicorn. And everybody was like, that's bullshit. Unicorns aren't real. But anyway, it's manufactured unicorn. Anyway, I'm sorry for the clumsy video, and until my next video, I hope you enjoyed this one, and you guys keep reading. Bye.